Welcome to episode 12 of Navigating Complexity. As we wrap up this season, we're going back to where complexity starts, childhood. Dan and Matt talk with Samantha Jansky, head of school at Ascent, an Acton academy, about how childhood shapes who we become. They dig into how we're programmed as kids and why unlearning and relearning are key parts of growth. If you've ever wondered how to build curiosity, resilience, and agency in kids or yourself, this episode will make you rethink education and personal development. Samantha shares her journey from her own school experience to working in post-earthquake Haiti to co-founding a learner-driven school that's challenging the old rules of education. There's no set path, but there is a hero's journey for everyone. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome to episode 12 of Navigating Complexity.
We made it.
Into the season.
Yeah.
Love this. Special guest today, and I'm really excited about our previous conversation, Samantha Jansky, and what this podcast is going to be about. Because it's, everything we've been talking about in navigation of complexity or navigating complexity, we've looked at it from different aspects throughout the season. And culminating in this, which is going to be when we talk about school. Right. And at the end of the day, we are complex humans. And even as small as we are, that's when we're getting all the programming in. So super interested in diving into that. So why don't we just learn a little bit more about you, Samantha? Everybody already knows about Matt.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I'm so excited to have you because I was just blown away as we did the first 11 episodes everybody sort of had this like hero's journey framework that came out, which reminded me a lot of Ascent, but also that there's no playbook, right, that I'm aware of, other than what you guys are working on for navigating the complexity of childhood, right? So that a lot of these challenges that come up later on in life, you're really well prepared for. And I was surprised that these 11, successful, happy, well-adjusted people all had to go through this sort of element of deprogramming almost, or learning how to do things differently as adults. So, yeah,
great observation. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the hero's journey is such a powerful framework because that is what Joseph Campbell pulled it from our experiences and found that monomyth.
But before we jump into that, let's talk about you.
Okay, great.
I want to introduce yourself to the audience. Because I know it's easy to jump into the thing, but let's talk about who Samantha Jansky is and what you do now, and let's introduce the school.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I am currently serving as head of school of Ascent Academy. Mm-hmm. We are I say it's not pre-K, but we serve ages 4 to 6 in one studio, 6 to 9 in the other. And then we have a 9 to 12 studio. So young people ages 4 to 12. We are a learner-driven environment, which means that on an individual level, the learners have autonomy over their work. And actually, again, I want to start with the core of what we do, because I get into the hows a lot really easily, because that's where my 100%. Mind is. I'm
just who Ascend is. I mean, you guys also did a name change, yes, because it was something else before, or
no. So Ascent Academy is part of a larger network of learner-driven schools. Okay. Called the Acton Network.
Got it. Okay. So people might be familiar with Acton. That's been around longer?
Acton's been around since 2009 and started in Austin.
Okay.
I joined their first campus in 2012 as a guide.
Got it. And then they went and started having this larger network.
So we built out what we were doing and packaged it so people could start schools all over the world. Now there are over 250 around the world.
Before we jump into the schools, I want to learn more about Samantha. Because the schools is going to, I know we're about to go a deep dive there because it's so fascinating, but I want to touch on why you and Ascent and
where it came from.
Yeah, how you got there?
My hero's journey?
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
How'd you end up here?
Okay, great. Okay. Well,
when I was 4.
I describe it as a series of very fortunate events. I happened to go to an incredible school my whole life called Jefferson County Open School in Lakewood, Colorado. Self-directed school, all about experiential learning. And I was empowered at a very young age with a growth mindset, to be a lifelong learner, someone who's really curious.
Yeah.
And so I found myself loving school, loving learning. They sent us traveling around the world.
Wow.
And so I got to experience all kinds of cultures and people and broaden my worldview very young.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got to college, I was confused as to why my peers, who I love very much, were not sitting in the front row
Right.
eating it all up. I was so interested in what I was learning.
Okay.
And I really credit that to my early experience.
Wow.
And
I was about to ask,
yeah.
like, you got one experience, but how did you learn about the other side? And that makes sense, the
Yes.
other side of the experience.
It was just kind of in me. It was really funny because we didn't have, it was unconventional. So we had pass-fail, and my transcripts were 60 pages long of just an explanation of what I did throughout my 4 years of high school. We had independent projects where we went really deep in certain subject areas, and I didn't have a lot of practice taking tests, and I didn't have a GPA. So I got to college, and it was just kind of another system to figure out. And so I say all of that because it has really helped me see what the model I'm in now, how it works in the long term game that we're playing, where you build up these skills at a young age. You can become an adaptable, curious person that applies everywhere.
Right.
So that was really helpful. I loved learning, but I knew I wanted to serve. That was also, I think, something that they instilled at a young age, was service to others and helping your community. And so I went in the direction of international studies and humanitarianism, and thought I might go off and see where I could help the most and make the most difference. I found myself interning in DC for a while, and then I landed a job with a very small organization running schools in Haiti, out of Aspen, Colorado. Actually, I'm from Denver, so and I got to see firsthand what the impact of education has on a society. I mean, we all know it, but I felt like I saw it on a different level.
Well, that's what I meant by the other side of the coin. So is your experience in Haiti, is that what you say was the other side of that coin?
Can you fill me in on what you mean by the other side of that coin?
You talk about how you grew up a certain way.
Yeah.
You were taught a certain.
Yeah.
But there's the other side of the coin is most of public school and everything else is taught completely different.
Oh,
right?
Sure.
Than the
Where did I
experience-
see that?
Yeah.
Where the need is?
And so I'm just, when you said I got to be able to see other ways of teaching, I was wondering if Haiti was what kind of showed you some of the other side of that coin, or is it just along the way in college and everything else you saw the experience others had?
Yeah, I think it was more like in college I got to see, I just sort of noticed
Got it.
that maybe other people didn't have. It's not that they weren't curious humans. It was
Right.
just that they related to
Right.
learning so different.
Yeah.
And it took a lot for them to get there.
Their programming was different.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
And
tell my daughter all the time, it's all about
Right.
programming. You're a small computer. It's another small computer over there, and everybody's just get programmed different. That's all it is.
the cool thing about it is that you can change your
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can change it, yeah.
And so I saw that, I guess in Haiti kind of opened up just how I saw the broader society relate
Right.
to education. And unfortunately, at the time, it was right after the big earthquake in 2010, and we were wanting funding for our schools. And that's not what these big foundations were interested in funding. It was urgent need.
Right.
Food, water, shelter.
Mhm.
But at the core of so many of that country's problems was a lack of education.
Right.
And just through my own reflective process, and then kind of observing our own education system in the United States, I decided that I wanted to go into education policy.
Got it.
and see if there's a way to make change there.
Got it.
And so I went through the process of applying for grad schools and got in and was on my way. And I had one of these moments
Right.
where somebody who I'd gone to undergrad with, who was actually had just finished the same graduate program I was going to go into, we connected and said, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I said, yes, I want to change the world. And I think education's the way to do it. And he said, you're going to be doing a lot of statistics and sitting at a desk. And
Oh,
I said, yeah, I've heard that. Okay. I'm kind of.
yeah. I can deal
You
with
don't know
that.
what you
Right.
don't know, right?
Yes. And so I heard it. I kind of pocketed it. And then I think it was him, someone else, somewhere I heard, no one's going to take you seriously if you haven't taught.
Oh,
And you need to be in the classroom.
got it.
And so I, at the time, was actually working for an entrepreneur in Los Angeles who's starting a wellness company. And that was fun getting that off the ground. So I got the startup side of things and got to see entrepreneurship from a really close-up lens, which was awesome. He had heard about the Acton MBA and knew I was grappling with all of these things and said, have you heard about this school in Austin that is creating basically what he had heard, a school for young people to explore entrepreneurship. That was kind of his summary that he heard, but to develop an entrepreneur's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I leaned into it. I read the website. I saw everything and was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is interesting.
Similar
Yeah.
to your school when you were younger, right?
Yes, exactly.
it lines
Every
right up.
word I read, I was like, yes, I was so aligned. And so I called up the grad program or emailed them and deferred for a year. So I'm going to take this apprenticeship in Austin at the school because they were offering an apprenticeship to learn how to be a guide. And I never looked back.
Nice.
A year later, I said, sorry, I'm not coming. I found what I need to do. Yeah, I loved working with young people. I found that was really where I wanted to be was with them.
Yeah.
On the ground.
And so you were working with what age at that point?
That was elementary. So in that studio is what we call classrooms. It's ages 6 to 10, probably. Yeah, all together in a mixed age environment.
You said something earlier, and I wanted to pull on the thread. You said that you found that we don't do critical thinking. Is it critical thinking that you said until university?
Teaching people how to think. Yeah.
To university. I wonder, just as you were talking about your experience, you got to university and you said, why aren't all these kids trying to absorb this information like I am? Did you see during your university years, did you see that curiosity begin? Did you see that critical thinking begin in this classroom that until then hadn't had that? Does that make sense? Did I articulate that well enough?
Yeah, I don't want to generalize either because there were certainly dedicated, interested students in university.
Yeah.
It was just that it didn't seem like, it just felt like the majority were lost trying to figure out what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't know exactly my direction either or anything like that. I was less focused on the next steps and more focused on the classes I wanted to take.
Yeah.
What was interesting me in the moment.
Learning the process.
Yeah, and for, better or worse, I mean, the things just kind of landed where they were for me and it worked out. But I think that what I mean by that is just that I was just in the front of the class with my hand up and I wanted to just soak up every ounce of what was being taught, and of course there were classes that didn't resonate and I didn't feel that way, and there were certainly failures that occurred, but and I'm grateful for that, but I think it was more that
yeah, what I'm hearing or maybe I'm just trying to piece it together, but sounds like because you learned to think earlier on and you had this natural appetite for curiosity and lifelong learning, you had a different outcome in mind. Your outcome was just, I just want to learn. I just want to, this sounds interesting. I'm going to go learn that. And that was the outcome versus where a lot of society is, I'm going to go to college so I can figure out what I need to do next to get a job. And so it's just a different outcome base. So it's like, oh, this class is boring because I'm not sure it's going to get me to where I need to go. I'm going to change majors. I'm not sure what I want to do. So there's always this outcome of what I want to become that makes a lot of stress for that individual, right? And so it does distract from that learning. Anyway, just observations of things I've learned and kind of what you're saying. I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but that's...
Yeah, I think that is true for a lot of people, and using, trying to find direction in university, like we said, is...
Well, the whole
that's an
saying
expensive
way back when, I mean, whenever I went to college and it was like, go find yourself in university, go find yourself, it's like, because for the first time, it wasn't that and I say first time, but this last century, until then, we always like did what our family did as far as here's what or the blacksmiths now, or whatever that looks like. But in the industrial age, it's like you've got to go learn something that your parents didn't do. So your parents weren't equipped to kind of help you find that next thing. So let's go find yourself over here. So that's where that distraction is. And then, as you pointed out, it's just become a much, much, much more expensive venture to try to do that now.
Well,
but go ahead.
I mean, what's interesting about it though, so I first got onto acting in a pretty similar way, where I learned about the business school. I was like, this is what I've been like, these are my people, right? This is what I'm interested in. And so I started teaching a course that was called Life of Meaning 2. And so the idea was, you're right that if you don't have a parent or somebody like that in your life to say, hey, go be a lawyer or a doctor, right, then okay, the university will deal with it. And what we found with those MBA students was that they would do anything, and I think this is true of most graduate schools, to fit themselves into a mold that an employer wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just, in my view, inherently unsustainable, right? And so what we realized in that class and trying to help students think through, we didn't have the answers, but what's going to be meaningful to you for the rest of your life? It was, you've got to pick an industry, a functional area, and then be clear about what that next step is going to get you. And that's really all you need to do. You don't need to buy the right glasses and become a BCG consultant, right? Unless that's the thing that you are genuinely passionate about. And so I sort of saw that, and that was what got me interested in the earlier years of Acton and Ascent, because it was like, well, we have these students that are super accomplished, like Olympic athletes, special forces folks, and they were completely lost. And there's not many more kind of skilled driven people that you could think of. And so I always thought that was sort of the thing that opened my eyes, and why my family ended up attending Ascent, was because it was a way to solve some of these problems that I saw in folks that were in their mid to late 20s, and they weren't problems. I didn't think they were problems. They thought they were problems, right? They were like, hey, I have to figure this thing out, and I don't really feel like I fit in any of these molds. And so that was the thread that I started pulling, and how I met Samantha and the rest of the Ascent folks.
Love that. And now it's time to jump into Ascent.
Great.
Because now we've got the nice base of why we got here. But nice segue into, and I want to talk about how your family, you told me a little bit about your daughter and her businesses and everything else. I want to touch on that. But why don't we just tell the audience who Ascent is and how the school is different than public school? I think that how the programming is different.
Yeah, it's really unlike anything. Our mission is that each person who enters our doors will find a calling to change the world. And we really mean that. And everything that we do feeds that mission. And every tool that we employ is to support each person in getting there eventually. And that looks really different because at the youngest ages, we have our 4 to 6s spending their morning in a Montessori work cycle, which helps to build a foundation of independence. And, they're learning to iron and...
I was going to say, wash dishes.
Yeah, and wash dishes and make tea. That's a really important work. And, how to take care of themselves, when to take a snack break, when to really listen to your body. And then how to choose your work. How do you want to spend your day? What are you interested in? What are you leaning towards? And having someone there to support and ask questions. And so we start very young with them trying, navigating what to do with their time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the morning work cycle. And in the afternoon, they're outside in a loose parts play environment, which means we don't have a playground, nothing with a prescribed use, basically. So it looks like junk. It's tires and milk crates and barrels. And they spend their afternoon playing, which is the important work of childhood. And they're navigating conflict resolution and how to build something. And I had an idea for how this rocket ship is supposed to look, and you have a different idea than I do. And how do we come together and collaborate? And how do we clean up? And all of these things these little pieces of their everyday that build a very strong foundation that helps them and their next steps. And then as they get older into the 6 to 9 studio, they're now working on, they continue conflict resolution and building interpersonal relationships, and we don't shy away from difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And on their individual levels, they're learning how to set SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
So they plan out their day, and they have badges they're working towards, which are kind of like the longer term goals. They learn to break that work down by week and by day.
Yeah.
They participate in Socratic discussions so that we're working on critical thinking at a young age and how to make decisions and imagining first what would I do if I were in this situation. Most of our Socratic discussions are ethical dilemmas, and really just learning how to put your thoughts into clear, concise words.
Right.
They have a town hall meeting each week where they come together and discuss community issues and solve them. So they're learning problem-solving skills.
And the students are setting this agenda, right? I mean, it's not
for town hall, correct?
Yeah, right. It's not a guide or some adult in their life who's telling them
these are the
what's
problems
important.
they see in their community. That's what's important to them. Sometimes it's our badges aren't being approved fast enough by the older Explore Studio, which I'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who will help support them in their work, the younger ones. Sometimes it's we can't agree on what to play during free time, and there's a lot of conflict on the field, which is where a lot of stuff gets worked out. It's where they bring up what's important to them. Yeah. They're working on the piece where they're finding a calling. Like I said, these are all the things they need in order to find a calling. So we're building up the skills. And then there's actual exploration of callings that happens. And that's through our quests. And that's a 6-week-long project-based adventure where they dig into a different calling or area of study. So we've got architecture and entrepreneurship. They just finished Chess Quest. Right now they're in Survivor Quest. So they're learning about basic human needs for survival and how to start fires and how to collect water and build shelter. But then they also will explore biology and physics and design. There's a coding one. So this is where they get to
see what's in their heart.
Yeah, explore different things. We had a child years ago who had enjoyed his first architecture class. It was a tough one. They're actually sketching out a design for their ideal school building. And, flash forward years later, now he's a teenager and he's already had an apprenticeship with an architect.
Nice.
And he's still interested in what it takes to build a building and get into real estate. So you never know what's going to spark something. And so it's time for them to explore what's out there.
So cool. From a very simplistic standpoint, as you're describing all this, in my head, I'm thinking, the framework of typical schools is give people fish, and these companies that you go work for will give you fish, right? And just make sure that you do things right so you get that fish. And you guys are teaching how to hunt. Like, here's how you go do it yourself. How you become independent. Here's how you critical think. Here's how everything comes from within versus from the exterior, right? Which is, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but that's where the whole grading and everything, you talked about testing and all that kind of stuff. That's where you got to fit into what they want. And so it's got to fit these things versus like, what is it that you want? Which is what I'm hearing, which resonates and aligns really well to a lot of things that we're doing. So happy to hear that.
The word agency comes up a lot. Really, not just being independent, but really capable. and independent. And this idea of spending your childhood having experiences where you really get to know yourself and understand your gifts, maybe discover new ones, and then have the awareness and where you might be able to apply those gifts.
Well,
and I think and where you are in the context of a community as well. It's not just who I am, but it's how do I fit into everything that's going on? How do my actions affect others?
Well, and it's so interesting too, because we've been talking about the learner so far, but the same is applied to the family. So like if you get a group of parents together from Ascent, they will always joke about how nobody answers your questions. And it creates this environment where your child is the source of truth, right? The learner is the source of truth. And so if you want to know what's going on, you need to do the hard work of developing a relationship with your child, making sure that they're not too hungry to have the conversation, or, they're not like they've been outside all afternoon and it's just not the right place. And so it brings this level of intentionality that I think in a lot of schools, most of the school environments that I've seen or been a part of, the idea is we're outsourcing our child's education to somebody else. And this is our child's the boss, and we're on the team with the school environment to be able to support this kid in whatever ways they need. And it sounds pretty simple, but it is fundamentally different than anything I've experienced, because they're just like life. There are no answers, right? And so you don't give the kids answers. There's no answers for the parents. And so it creates a very collaborative, like, let's figure this out together, that I think is also very different.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually think that is the most important core difference, is that we've completely change the role of the adult in a learning environment, which is that the contract so we're bound by contracts and covenants between parents and the children with each other, and the contracts in the studio that the learners write at the start of each year,
which teaches integrity
and whatever character traits they value and that they want to grow, and those come out in each variation each year, and that is the authority in the studio. And they hold each other to that. And the guide is there to support and ask questions, but guides never answer questions. The adult in the room is not the authority. And that's, to wrap your head around that's tough for most adults to understand that can work. But it does require us to trust that they're so capable, that what we can conceive of in terms of their capability is limited, that they go beyond the limitations that adults often put on them over and over and over again. And the parent relationship there, it's really interesting, because it is hard to hear either I don't know, or I don't want to talk about it, or, for your child to be your main source of information.
Totally.
Because we want that connection to be forged between parents and their children. It's tough to be committed to that long game of your child being your main source of information. But the beauty of it, and if you can stay committed, is what we tell parents, to the long game, is that what a rich relationship you're going to have forever if you start building that kind of trust early. And it takes time, and it takes time for that communication to build, because again, it's very different. You're forging something that isn't anywhere else really in the world. I mean, parents have good relationships with their children, but this kind of depth, I think, is rare. So it's a long game. We see over and over again the children who've gone through this model for years. This like beautiful, honest connection that they have with their families.
And the other thing too that I think is so different is, and I come from the experiential ed world, right, where you just let people fail, and the natural consequences are the things that you learn from. And everybody's going to learn something different, right? So like if you get that contract wrong at the beginning of the year, you're going to learn, and you will, 100% of a chance.
They fail a lot. Those
you will
promises break.
You will learn, and you will have those reflective periods. And it sounds pretty nerve-wracking, right? So I think one of the other things that Ascent does is there's no homework, right? But your child is progressing through that badge plan at their own pace. And sometimes it's very nerve-wracking as a parent to be like, well, my kid has a lot to do and they are not on track and they're also not motivated. And so the job isn't to like berate them through their badge plan. It's to help them figure out why they can be or should be motivated to do the things that they need to do to progress. And that's also just a fundamentally different relationship than like, I'm going to pay you, not that there's anything wrong with it, but like, I'm going to pay you $5 an A, or if you do all your homework, we'll do this thing, right? That's just not the relationship.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm hearing is, obviously we all grew up in different ways and, carrot stick type, discipline to do it. And what I'm hearing is it's not the long thing. That's more the short game. Do what I want you to do now, right? And you'll benefit later, but the child doesn't understand why they're doing it versus the long game. Let's make sure it comes from the heart. And I'm curious, and this raises another question. What does that mean during teenage years? Is there less rebellion because they've just,
question.
They've just kind of like, they're in harmony and aligned versus like, I'm now trying to be like,
you're overselling.
I'm not trying to, this is not a utopia.
I'm curious because there's got to be some difference. If you're a child and you've been told what to do for the first 13 years, and now you're like, well, I'm going to question all these things now because I'm older versus like I've been figuring this out along the way. I'm not saying that teenage years are ever easy, but I'm just wondering if there's and maybe maybe you don't know, but that's the first thing that came to mind is like, well, if we're taking the long route, maybe teenage is different. Were you a good teenager, Samantha?
Yeah, I want to say.
Perfect.
Let's put you on the spot.
I was unfortunately, I was a rule follower for a long time. No, I will say what I have seen is that, so what I do want to say is that we love failure and we love ambiguity and we value the experience of messing up and having to get back up. And that's where the hero's journey framework comes in, is that the hero fails. The hero finds themselves in caves. I mean, it happens. You get into those dips, and that is going to look different for each person.
That's where the creation is, the magic. Everything's in the gray.
You have to.
It's not in the black and white.
You have to end up there sometimes and get yourself out, and that is what defines a hero. Is that how do they respond to that? How do they then grab hold of the gifts that came from getting out of that, and then bring them into their world, into their lives, changed and transformed? And so I think when you have young people who have these reps and who face failure and who also hold high standards for themselves and each other, and they're practicing this all the time, they've got the muscle for when the really heavy stuff comes in, when they're in their teenage years, college, adulthood, and the stakes are higher. And so what we see is that, they're going to make mistakes as humans do, but they also hold each other to a very high standard.
Yeah.
And they're also doing really important work.
Right.
And so finding a connection to your work that early is also a really big deal, because it's like, I don't have time for that. I'm doing this really important work now. And actually, a friend who I've been with all these years, you don't have time for that. You've got important work to do too. Right. And so I'm not saying it doesn't, like, they're,
right. No,
this is not a utopia.
Exactly. I hear that
mess up,
but even what you said just then, it's so different than teenagers like, I'm going to just be on TikTok because I don't know what else to do and I'm bored and more chaos, and I haven't had that muscle that you're talking about, which you're exactly right. I love the saying, necessity is the mother of invention, because we all find ourselves, and that's when the greatest gifts come out. So the gray not the black and white, is where you find yourself thinking about that new business invention or that new need, like all the things that you need to get out. And then what that does, as you know, is builds confidence and self-confidence. Oh, I was able to get out of that hole myself and with a great idea. And it's now the next, I tell my daughter, life's like Donkey Kong. You see all these barrels coming down and you've got to run at them and you've got to go over them. You got to do these things. You can't run away from them. Because the next time you see something that could be a problem, you just run towards it because it's like, I just got to get over this, figure this out. So.
Yeah, I think the reps is the thing that I have found to be the most important, and even with an 8-year-old, we're starting to see the benefit. And so I don't know how it turns out when they get to high school, but
right.
but what I do know is that she won't have her first experience of autonomy and agency when she's driving a 10,000-pound vehicle, and some of the traditional stuff where problems come up, right? So I think it's just having those reps.
Tank.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
a 10,000 vehicle.
But it's
like my F-250 is 9,000.
I'm not a car guy. I know a lot about bikes.
I just nodded along.
They're weight in grams. But I think that really is the difference, is that you give them reps, and then whatever comes up later. I mean, it's a joke. How do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? Practice. And so how do you get good at navigating life? Well, you practice navigating life in the way that you will for the vast majority of it, which is without somebody telling you how to do it.
Yeah. Which brings me to the conversation we had in prep for this, and I want to come back to your daughter and her entrepreneurism. Can you share some of the stories?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think, if you depending on how everything that Samantha just said, right, that also sounds like a programmatic training for an entrepreneur, right? And I've always felt like entrepreneurship is one of those things that we value in the United States very, very highly. And there's no programmatic way to create people that are good at it. And the core skills are the things that we're talking about, problem solving, a sense of your own agency, right? The confidence to go after solutions that
town hall
that are unconventional. The idea of having a contract and holding each other accountable is about as simple of a definition of business as I can give. And so
pause that for a second, because I want to say something. That right there is so valuable. And why I jumped at integrity right away is because as an employer, a lot of times when you get people that don't have agency, don't have integrity, don't understand, what is the first thing they do? They start blaming others. They start blaming, I'm late because of the traffic. I'm late. Like there's no integrity in their word. I said I was going to be there, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go through hell and high water to make that happen. That attitude's not there. So the contract piece is super intriguing to me. And what you just said, it just super important to start at a young age, understanding that your word is your word. And if I've got that, then I can build relationships. I can build business. I can build all other things. But if I don't have that, I won't get trusted. So.
Yeah. Well, and my daughter is, she is a curious creature like all kids. And so she has this skill set. And so it's manifested itself. There's a program called the Children's Business Fair. And so Ascent hosts it. This year was a little bit different, but basically with zero help from your parents, kids build a business, right? So my daughter has done, she sold fruit kebabs with fresh whipped cream. She made a homemade goods booth this year. And so she does it all on her own. We give her a loan. She pays us back. Then she keeps the profits. Then she started doing it outside of that context. And it wasn't about just entrepreneurship, right? She actually wanted to learn how to make ice cream this last summer. And so without this venue, she just built an ice cream stand and launched it and started selling ice cream to people. And so I think that it becomes a skill set for exploration. It's not just about the business itself, right? It's like, here's the thing I want to learn. And so, I mean, she's done 4 or 5 businesses at this point. She's made money. She's been profitable on all of them. And so, we're not talking about 9-figure checks, but I mean, it's a very powerful experience for a kid to feel that sort of success. And she's explored different things with each of those little businesses. And you see it too, not just in the businesses. Like she's planning a birthday party that's a sleepover. And every time I can't find her, she is planning that party and she's doing research and she's trying to find the right sleeping arrangement, or, is this movie better than that movie to watch with my friends? And so you kind of see the behavior, the entrepreneurship is a useful way to do it.
Critical thinking.
Think about it. Yeah. But I actually think of it as a creative act, which is how I think of entrepreneurship, is that these students now have the ability to create something that didn't exist before. And it doesn't matter if it's a business or education policy or, a new way to teach a foreign language, right? I mean, there's, it's unlimited, but I think that's the thing that I observe.
I love that. And we talked about my magazine, Founding Austin, that we started in 2016. I've interviewed over like 300 entrepreneurs. And in that process of interviewing, I'm always trying to find that common thread. And a lot of it is what you just mentioned. It is a lot of the things that she's learning at 8 and younger is just the ability to be the agency, to like, hey, this is how things work and it's not so difficult. So when she's of age to go either build a business or start a job, and she doesn't like the guy or the person or whoever that she's working for, has the ability to be like, I'll just go do things myself. It's that confidence. It's that learning to hunt versus, being handed a fish is so, so important. And these things that are great and fun to see, but they're also teaching some great and valuable skills.
Well, I think they get reps in learning what their limits are and how to push them.
Yeah.
And so
Which entrepreneurs do all the time.
Yeah, right, exactly.
From time to time. Yeah.
So it's like, but you really don't know your limit until you fail. And so that willingness to lean into failure and we're not saying failure doesn't hurt, but
right.
To see what am I capable of? Oh, there it is. Okay, now can I push beyond that? And what can I learn and come back to it next time? I think that's critically important.
Well, we could sit here and talk for hours.
I know.
Because this is just so fascinating. I think we're all aligned in exactly what needs to happen. And I'm so proud of the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I definitely want to continue these conversations and stay aligned, because there's a lot of synergy that we're working on together. Thank you for being with us. Can you imagine? Can you believe it's already been 45 minutes?
No, this went by very fast. Well, one thing I was curious to ask about, because I don't think we hit on it yet, though, is you went to 4 to 6 year olds, and I'm so curious. Like, there's lots of entrepreneurs.
We're not stopping yet.
Yeah, hold on. I have one more question. I'm just so curious, right? Because so much of the methodology was developed in a graduate school and then in kind of the high school, middle school context, and then you had this insight, you and your co-founder, that hey, this works for 4-year-olds, right? Like, how on earth did you make that leap? Because when I talk to people about this school, that's the part that they find the most counterintuitive.
Is it happening so young?
Yeah.
Yeah. We had experience with 6 and up. And we kept seeing that some children who had a bit of a foundation with some early independence could take off a little bit faster with some of the pieces, like setting SMART goals and navigating choice. So if they're given choice at a younger age, so we just saw it as guides. We saw that the few people, I mean, everyone adapts eventually, because this environment really is designed for all children. But the ones who could jump in a little bit faster and had a little bit. So we thought, well, what if we built an environment that was really catered to that age, that really saw what they're capable of at that age? And I think that's also where we're blowing it out of the water, or I shouldn't say that. I say we Ascent. The children are blowing it out of the water. Because the oldest in that environment, who are just 6 years old, newly 6, are such strong leaders.
Nice.
They're giving Montessori lessons to the 4-year-olds.
Wow.
They have their own contract. It's be nice, be safe, clean up.
I love it.
They hold each other to that. They know what their guardrails are. They've led circle time, their discussions. So we're seeing, but again, like I said, they keep going beyond what we think they're even capable of.
Yep.
And so that's been really beautiful to see.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway watching Ascent is that like as adults, we just have to not mess it up. Like they already have everything that they need and they're totally capable. And the only thing we can do is get in the way.
That I completely agree with that. And I know we have to go, but there's one piece that I don't want to miss, which is our philosophy of learning. And I think it wraps up a lot of this, which is that clear thinking leads to good decisions. Good decisions lead to the right habits. The right habits lead to strong character, and character becomes your destiny.
I love it.
I think that that's a really important map of what we do and how that supports our mission as well. That does start at a very young age.
And that was a perfect wrap. Thank you so much. Love having this conversation today, and I'm sure we'll continue.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha.
Thanks for
really appreciate it.
It was
Yeah.
such a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on episode 12 and this season of Navigating Complexity. And what a way to close it. Samantha, Dan, and Matt took us from rethinking education to raising young entrepreneurs, showing what happens when we stop handing kids a playbook and start helping them write their own. It comes down to trust, agency, and the freedom to fail, because that's where real learning and living happens. As Samantha put it, clear thinking leads to good decisions. Good decisions build the right habits, and the right habits shape strong character. In the end, character defines your future. We hope these conversations have encouraged you to embrace complexity in parenting, work, or life, and to find your own way forward. Because as Samantha and the learners at Ascent remind us, the journey is the point. Thanks for joining us.